Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.
I'm Geraud Brisson from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week we're joined by film professionals, and this week I'm joined by the editing team of Shantaram, Apple Plus's new series. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I guess my first question for you guys is, what was your knowledge of the book and the history of Gregory before getting onto the show?
When I found out I was interviewing for the job, I got the book and I listened to it morning to night.
It's a long book.
I got the audio version, so like while I was cooking and while I, just throughout my day, morning, I would turn it on and just have it with me all day long, which was really great, actually. It was a great way to get into, the material and then the interview. I was, because I just didn't have that much time to familiarize myself. But as I started, I also got hooked.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why it was so popular. You want to just sit with it and continue until you're done. So yes, I was fully immersed. Mm-hmm. And then of course I got curious about the author and just kind of researched a little bit. But as far as I can tell, I think it's kind of a romanticized version of what he went through. So
mm-hmm. How about you guys?
I knew of the book. I had friends who had told me how much they loved the book when they went to India and brought it with them. It was like, I think when the books came out, like early 2000, was that 2003 or something like that. So I had the book, but I never opened it.
I'm exactly the same because it's so big.
Because I still haven't been to India.
Yeah.
But then after, as this came up, I did open the book. It was a mind trip to read the book at the same time I'm reading the script, I have to say. And at some point I had to leave the book because it was, but I had friends who were very excited that I was working on Shantaram because they were big fan. They are a big fan of it.
Mm-hmm. How about yourself, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I started reading the book after my meeting with Steve Lightfoot, and loved it. I mean, I was basically reading it to get the sense of the character and who he was. Like Geraud, I had to put it down though, because when you do adaptations, you start getting lost in what was where, and we obviously have to live within what we see, what's shot within our own stories. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, reading, what I did of the book to get a sense of who he was and the fun and the character and the world, I think was, that was really important to me to get through. I think I probably got through the first about 350 pages before I had to, retire it. I'll come back to it maybe eventually, but it's so tough to come back to now that we have this own vision in our head of where our personal experience is with it.
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. Well, I'd be interested to know, because I've talked to some editors about this, and the idea of like, how do you do research into the topics around what you're working on, even though it might not be something that you're using? So for example, him breaking out of prison or the drug trade or what have you in India. some editors I've talked to like to get into that and sort of understand like the history of it and things around it, and some want to sort of just be a blank slate when they get the footage in. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I feel like it's an interesting question because, you know, even like with reading the book, there is definitely that thing of like, okay, I read the book, I from beginning to end, and I was attached to it, and then so that was the research. But then as Tim and Geraud were saying, it was for me, because I mean, I was so immersed in the book, it was hard to put it aside and really dig into, because a big difference with the material, the show, is that there's all these characters that are fleshed out and that have their own arc, which in the book everything is from his point of view, so he doesn't know what Carla's doing or what, you know, he doesn't understand those relationships at all. And in the show we get insight into who each person is and how they fit into the story from more of a, even though it's still he's the main character, but still in the show there's just a step back, which makes a big difference in the experience of it. But I think it's much more effective. It was very smart to do it that way. It took me a while to get to that, but once I was immersed in the show, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It's much smarter to do it this way, so that we're invested as a viewer into, oh, you know, we know that there's dangers coming for him, so it adds tension to Lynn's story. If we're just from his point of view, it would be. So I think with research in general, the challenge is that we're we're signing up for the showrunner's vision, and we're trying to expand that, but we're trying to really give the showrunner what the vision is, while also hopefully enhancing it. But when you do research, it's like you can go into all these different directions with what you're finding in your head, and really what you want to do is go that way. And then, so I think it can be helpful, but you really have to be disciplined about what you're doing in the project.
Well, it's interesting because like I guess like you talked about these new, like seeing, not new characters, but seeing the other side of the characters, right? So because the perspectives change. So like in the post process, we're essentially dealing with this new information. So did you guys have to, I know like a lot of it would come in the script stage, but did you guys have to sort of work those characters or really try and flesh out their character development more, or play the relationships off differently, or how did that work or influence your editing?
Maybe I'll go. I don't. Well, I think not unusual. Like you do wanna, as you working through the process of editing, you do discover that what you have to emphasize and what you have to pull off. You know, what comes across very quickly, and then what actually needs to be more developed. I think in the case of the characters in the book, I think some of them. I think Lisa's character is not that much in the book. She got combined, and she was a brand new character almost in some way. And then a lot more intrigues, I think, happened very early on, as opposed to the book, which kind of postponed a lot of the things. He's mostly on his own in the first part of the book, meets Prabhu, and travels, but otherwise doesn't, and so we had the love story came very much earlier on than it is in the book, in my understanding. And for that matter, I think, we had to be clear about who Carla was, who is a love interest for Lynn. We had to make sure that even though she was a person who is very guarded, was almost on the cold side, She's and a mystery for Lynn. She had to have moments where she would be interested in Lynn. It was not just Lynn's point of view anymore. You had to see it in both ways. I think in those terms, I could see how for me, they know we explored other sides of them than that was in the book, at least at first.
It's interesting. So was there like, did you guys have to do restructuring of anything? Because I know, the editing's the last rewrite. So were there any moments or things because you talked about shifting the love scene or the love relationship earlier? Is there other elements that had to change?
So and that was done by Steve Lightfoot and the writers. That was in the process of adapting the book, that they had already moved those things up. That being said, we did shift some things around. Maybe I'll let Tim speak about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the glory of the show and being able to have these 3 episode blocks that we were all doing, it really lent itself to the freedom of moving things around episode to episode. Is this episode more based on certain characters? If so, let's lose some of the extraneous stuff and get them into their own storyline in the next episode. So I think, from the approach, at least in the 3 episode block, really approaching it like a movie and being able to define the proper spot in the storyline, I think that was something that we were able to all do. I do think, there was some shifting of episodes, between our blocks, but I think story-wise, I mean, if we're talking the general arc of the series, I mean, that was kind of laid before us by the adaptation that Steve and writing team had already come up. So, for us, it was always more about pacing and how is this going to play in this episode, as opposed to total story arc. I mean, we didn't have to, I think, fix any major story plot points that felt completely wrong in the timeline that we had already had been established for us.
I just had one storyline that had to be excised from the episode, but since the episodes were long, we were able to do that. That had been in the book, but I feel like what was interesting is that everything in the book is from Lynn's point of view. So all of the scenes where Lynn is not in them were completely made up from scratch, whereas all of the experiences that Lynn has were closely inspired from the book. So those characters are much more fleshed out. Abdullah and even Carla's relationship with Kader Khan, which comes up much later in the book, like, that she's connected, he understands that almost at the end of the book. I think it is actually. So there's a lot added to the series, and it helps us to understand what Lynn is really walking into, rather than just coasting with him, as he's kind of like, he doesn't understand why he's being attacked or whatever. Like, we're able to see how he steps into all of this danger. It adds to the tension.
Yeah, interesting. Now, like, I know that typically you break the series up into one person's going to tackle this many episodes next, but you're also an editing team. So how did you guys work together to make sure there was a cohesive sort of feel to the overall film?
Well, we did and we didn't in some ways. I mean, what allows us to sort of be on our own is Steve Lightfoot, who is a great showrunner and was like, we could trust that he was guiding us throughout. And I think I'll let my colleagues speak about that, their experience with him. But for me, it was always, I felt like in safe hands every time I was asking him a question. It was very like everything was laid out. He knew exactly where we were going. That being said, by the nature of the shooting schedule, there were so many overlaps, and we were doing like 3 consecutive episodes each. I did the first 3 and then the last 3. Team ended up actually covering dailies for my last 3 for a period of time, because I had to work on the first 3 with the producers. And so I think it, and then I'd seen a little bit of the footage from 2 for a similar reason for Fabienne, even though it's like it ended up that we are either covering for somebody else. It's not like necessarily editing the footage, but it was really helpful to know that I've seen, even though I didn't need the extra work, but I'm sure Tim didn't need the extra work. It was very interesting to know what has been shot for the other episodes for me, because I was like, oh, there is that scene in there. How did that work? And then I would speak to Fabienne and ask questions, and we spoke a few times about it. Some of the scene that got moved around. I had one scene that was in Fabienne's episode that moved into my first episode, and usually were scenes about the flashbacks that were more sort of, and they were because of trying to set up our characters, like psychologically where they were coming from, Lynn specifically. So that's what happened. Somebody else?
Tim
Yeah,
and Fabienne? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of team, I mean, I think we all had a trust in each other that we were being led in the correct direction at the end of the day, which I think we were. And so I think really when it's coming down to day to day, I mean, we didn't speak every day about what was happening and what's happening with your episode. But I think probably weekly or every couple of weeks, I would check in on scenes and see where certain characters are developing. I think that's, I think the challenge with the show and the shooting schedule, I mean, we were, at some point they were shooting 6 episodes at once, 7 episodes at once. So, how do you, and that's with multiple crews, we had a red team and a blue team, so we had 2 units going, 2 separate directors. So how do you make sense of getting all that? So being able to jump in and help out with some episodes in block 4, for instance, being able to see things coming in from block 2, for me, guided kind of the character development of it all. I mean, that was super helpful. And I think, collaboration wise, I think I was very open to showing everything, at any point. And I think we all were, so that, at the end of the day, we're all pushing for a story that we're all happy with and is cohesive. So I think process wise for this, for me, it was great. It was, really nice to have that open, both Fabienne and Geraud. It wasn't like, hey, no, you can't see anything. I think we made a really good team. And I think, at the end of the day, being able and open to seeing things, even if they weren't finished, is something that helped the final product of the show.
Interesting.
And also, I just want to mention that, a lot of it was shot, well, it was, everything is set in India well, not everything, but most of the action is set in Bombay in 1982. And a lot of it was shot against blue screen. So while they were shooting, they were already planning on how they were going to dress the blue screen. They were planning a shooting unit in India to fill that in, and so we did have to collaborate on that, because while they were embroiled in shooting, the director and Steve were over in Thailand, we had to talk to each other and really discuss, how we were going to start planning for this and what we needed. They were always asking us, like, what do you need? What do you need? So the 3 of us would get together and talk about that to set the ground for that.
Now, I'm interested in knowing, because this deals with a lot. It deals with like slum areas. It deals with um, Indian culture in various capacities. But I'm wondering if in the edit suite was there discussions to make sure that you guys weren't othering the Indian culture, or was there discussions of like, let's make sure we get cut around this to get away from that? Just given that it is, Apple producing this in like a Western culture, digesting this, was there discussions about that?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So how did you guys tackle that in the cutting room?
Well, I think from the get-go, we knew that because the book itself is a point of view of a Westerner
Hmm.
traveling to India, and I think there is obviously uh, uh, a risk anytime you do that
Hmm.
to romanticize the trip, or the white savior type of syndrome. I know that with my director Bharat, um, who's from Indian background, we had a lot of discussion about it. We were very careful about some of the choices and how to emphasize or not emphasize certain things in the scenes. Um, then I think it was, for me, it was always like, I need people, I need to keep myself in check, and I need other people to do the same, and to keep me in check, and just realize that I came through to it with, I was trying to come into it at least, and I think everybody else's was like, I there's a lot that I don't know. I'm an outsider, and
Hmm.
always remember you're an outsider. So what would how would you um, show things? What is the level of distance that you have with the material? Can you put yourself in somebody's shoes? And when you do so, is it already influencing? Are you
Yeah.
already putting a point of view on it when you put yourself in somebody's shoes? Um, I feel like it was not the first time that I had to ask myself all those questions. I worked on another project before called CODA, and where clearly I was an outsider.
Hmm.
Um, uh, and I think we had a lot of people. Thankfully, we had a lot of people on our team that were Indian culture, that were could answer some of those questions and would check anyway along the way.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of, the hope is that we would get it right by the multiplication of point of view that we had on the show, watching it, or while we were making it. At least.
Okay. Interesting. Now, I have two more questions for you guys. One is, was there a particular scene in one of your episodes that was difficult to edit, but you're really pleased with the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I had two scenes basically stand out. My first was a scene from episode 7 where um, Connor Khan basically has a monologue, to the villagers of the slum, uh, and it was all in Hindi. So I don't speak Hindi. I don't believe he spoke Hindi. So it was about a 5 to 7 minute monologue where, I found that really challenging. I've done other foreign language stuff where, you get a feel, but my first cut, I think I had several repeats, several. It was really hard to follow along. Um, but I think what it boiled down to is, we also had translations issues, right? So the way it was written, spoken, there's different dialects, there's different meanings within the language. So
Hmm.
um, that was one that really, really particularly, that took quite a while to get that into a spot where I feel like I was really happy with how it ended up. And for me, the other one, there was a giant kind of melee within the slums, and we were running 4 cameras just from a footage aspect. you know, there was about 125 extras, language barriers between crew and the extras, you know, the physical physical constraints of where they could set cameras up and not. You know, so I think we turned 38 hours of footage into, you know, about a 2-minute melee. So I was happy with how that ended up also. So I think two completely opposite spectrums of difficult. One was, you know, just the normal editing trudge of getting through tons of footage, and then the other was really, you know, I think the mental side of making sure that, you know, the insecurities of not speaking Hindi that I had, you know, ended up, you know, at the end coming through and something I'm proud of, like, pulling off, even though it's minor in the grand scheme of, you know, the show.
Yeah. How about yourself, Geraud?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, in terms of like what was difficult, it's interesting because there's like there is the thing that are challenging, and then there is the thing that are difficult, which are not always the same for me. But I'd say, but I cannot not say the very beginning of the show, the prison escape, because that was scrutinized a lot. There was additional photography. There was a lot of iterations of it. So that whole prison escape used to be a shorter sequence and became an 8-minute sequence eventually, or so I think it is now. So that I think that was that, and then they had many episodes, and they had to keep it going, and then there was trying to be, you know, sometimes mixing the tone and then not mixing the tone. Like, it was a lot of research through that opening. So I think that would be probably the first one that comes to my mind.
Oh, interesting. And Fabienne?
I just have a short scene that came to mind when you said that. It's when Prabhu and I can't remember her name, but his love interest, they're at the movie theaters. He takes her to the theater, and they're in the top. He's very proud to have gotten expensive tickets to be in the balcony. And the way it is that in the orchestra area of this is giant movie theater, and in the orchestra area, it's where they're the cheaper seats, and everybody's having so much fun and dancing and hollering and standing up and dancing with and everybody in the upper balcony is very quiet and just, you know, and I don't know, somehow it was really fun to first there were hardly any extras when it was shot. It was shot in 2 different times, because like we shot the balcony in Thailand, but then the bottom part was shot in Australia, and there were just very few extras. And then I put the scene together, and then I was like, oh, well, you know, it'd be great, you know, we have to shoot more extras in that location. You know, they shot them in groups so that we then compiled it together to give the impression of a big crowd. And then wanting like a very specific shot from the screen to the crowd. And so it just came together in tiny little increments, and it's a short scene, but like giving that feeling of that without, you know, saying anything, but just, of who Prabhu is and who, because he stands up and dances up in the balcony, but nobody around him is dancing, but they're all dancing in the bottom part. And I just thought it was a sweet moment that for me came together after, you know, a lot of time and a lot of different inputs from a lot of different people, and it was just a fun thing to see come together in the end.
So my last question for you guys, what would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I've been watching lately Money Heist, La Casa de Papel, Spanish, and I'm totally hooked to it, and it's very much a guilty pleasure. I should be anyway, I should be doing research for my next project, but yeah, it's just a really fun show that is very addictive, and if anybody hasn't seen it, you should if you have like, I don't know, a week to watch it, because there's a lot of seasons. Or don't watch it because it's very addictive.
How about yourself, Jerome?
Well, because I guess the holiday are coming. I have to say, I know I was preparing for that question, and still I'm not. I'm debating because it's not just one. But I'll go for The Sound of Music.
Oh, that's a great one. That seems, I don't know how it became a Christmas movie, but
I know it's nothing
always
to do
on.
with Christmas, but yeah.
Wow. And Tim?
Yeah, for me, it's nothing specific, but anything that is in the that seems to focus on teens. I think high school dramas, and
Yeah.
I find myself trying to relive my youth, I guess.
So it was good that you worked with Fabienne, who worked on Glee.
One of those guilty pleasures.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, of course, on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.
Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.